Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this round 4 coverage of the Zurich 1953 Candidates Tournament. Today I have a game from round 4 to present to you between Vasily Smyslov and Gideon Stalberg. But before I get to the game, I want to mention this was actually a really exciting round with a number of interesting games. And there's one game in particular that has become famous and has been annotated many times. So I'm not going to do that because I'm going to put a link in the description to a video post-mortem done by King's Crusher. So he covers that game pretty well. It's an interesting game. I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. It was a game between Taimanov and Najdorf, so two giants in the Sicilian playing the King's Indian defense. So Taimanov with the white pieces and Najdorf with the black pieces playing the King's Indian. And the story goes, Taimanov had played the white side of the King's Indian in this same line twice with victories in the USSR Championship recently, so he was feeling pretty good about it going into this. Whereas Najdorf had just learned something. He had played in the Mar del Plata tournament and had the white pieces against Gligoric, where Gligoric played the King's Indian defense against him. And Gligoric had some new ideas in the King's Indian defense and introduced what's known as the Mar del Plata variation today, and managed to defeat Najdorf. So that was Najdorf's introduction to this defense. Or this particular line anyway, and so he's trying it out in this game against Taimanov, and managed to surprise him, and a pretty interesting game ensued. So anyway, you can follow the link, and particularly if you're interested in the King's Indian defense, it's kind of a key game in the history of that defense. But today, yeah, we're looking at the game Smyslov-Stahlberg. Vasily Smyslov is a Soviet player. Was a Soviet player. He's actually only died recently. In March of 2010. So there's actually a couple of players from this tournament that are still alive today. Somewhat surprisingly, most of them have passed on because it was quite a while ago. But yes, Vasily Smyslov lived until 2010. He was a strong chess player for many years. He was world chess champion from 1957 to 1958, so 4 years after this date. He won the Soviet championship on 8 occasions, and he played in many chess Olympiads for the Soviets and won a total of 17 medals, which is an all-time record. So a strong player over many years. His opponent, Gideon Stalberg, with the white pieces, as a Swedish player, he won the Swedish Chess Championship in 1927, became the Nordic champion in 1929, and held that title for 10 years. He played individual matches against Rudolf Spielmann in 1933 that he won, and another one against Aaron Nimzowitsch in 1934 that he also won. So quite a strong player. Smyslov kicks off with e4, and Stahlberg replies e6. We get the French defense. So d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, the classical line. And bishop g5 was played, which is the most popular move even today, although the move e5 lately has come back into style somewhat, the Steinitz variation of the classical. It's the line I play myself, although I played this line too. And there are different ways for black to play here. You can play bishop e7, or you can play d takes e4, which is possibly the main line. Knight takes, and now bishop e7. And white almost always takes the knight here, which surprised me when I first learned this. You don't normally give up your bishop for a knight unless there's a good reason. But you're securing this knight on e4 for quite a few moves. The remaining pieces are not easily able to challenge it. Both this bishop and this knight are not in a position to really undermine it. And after bishop takes, then there won't be a pawn coming here to kick it either. So bishop takes is a main line. The other main line is g takes f6, which maybe is more popular today. It's an interesting way to play. The game could continue knight f3 and b6 with the idea of getting the bishop on the long diagonal. So in this position, black has suffered some pawn damage on the king side, obviously, but he's got the bishop pair and he has open lines. On the other hand, white has a great pawn structure which he can look forward to maintaining through the game. If he's successful, he'll have a good end game. He also has an advantage in space and easy development for his pieces. So there's really something for both sides in this position. And bishop takes f6 is the other main way to play. Now, white is not eager to grab that bishop right away. That would lead to pretty much equality, both bishops and knights going off the board. So neither side has the advantage of the bishop pair, and the development is about equal, and just a slight edge in space for white, but maybe one move advantage for black in development. So nothing much going on there. So white keeps that tension, keeps the knight here with the threat of taking the bishop later, and just continues developing. And black follows suit. Black continues to develop. Castles, queen e2. I'm not quite sure what the merit of queen e2 is versus some other square, but it is reinforcing the bishop and the knight here, so possibly that has something to do with it. Knight b6 attacking the bishop, and the bishop drops back to b3, and now bishop d7. With the idea, and you'll see this later in the game, of coming to bishop a4 and trading off this light squared bishop against this light squared bishop. The light squared bishop is black's bad bishop in the French defense because of these pawns, so it's often a strategy is to find a way just to trade off that piece. White castles. And now, in the past, actually, Smyslov and Gideon Stalberg had played this exact position before in a previous tournament, and Stahlberg had played the move bishop a4 at this time. And that game went bishop takes. No, he didn't take right away. What he did, cancel that. He took the bishop here first, which is with a check, and then queen takes, and then taking the if queen takes. I don't think queen takes was played in the game, but if queen takes, then the bishop takes, bishop knight takes, and then queen c4, forking the knight and the pawn. And this just wins a pawn for white. So I believe in this position black actually took with the pawn in the previous game, but didn't. This isn't so attractive. Black no longer has the advantage of the bishop pair, and he suffered pawn damage, so not a great position. So he's trying for something better here, and he comes up with the move queen e7. I looked at this with a chess engine, and the chess engine just recommended bishop e7, still with an advantage to white. You know, it's kind of a move that you hate to play because white does have an advantage in space, and by retreating your bishop like that, you're also giving white an advantage in development. So a tough move to play, and it does leave white with some edge. So Stahlberg tries queen e7. And now, after a few more moves of development, rook fe1, rook a d8, rook a d1. I think this game is a good example here of Smyslov's style. This is where Stahlberg plays bishop a4. The comment I was about to make on Smyslov's style is he was known as a positional player, and he's got kind of a positional advantage going here, where he's got more space in the center due to this pawn, and his pieces are actively placed. But it's a slight advantage. It's interesting to watch how he converts this advantage. So first of all, he allows this trade of the light squared bishop because it gets him an active queen. And there's one interesting point here. You might think, oh, queen c4 was a good move before. Why isn't it a good move here? But there's a problem with queen c4. Maybe if you want to take a look at this for a second, you can treat this as a tactical quiz. Okay, I'm going to give away the answer. The answer is knight takes b2 is now a fork. It forks the queen and the rook. So the difference between this position and the one we looked at earlier is that this rook is on that d8 square, d1 square, where it can be forked, whereas before it was on a1. So queen c4 is not a good move here. But queen b5, getting the queen to an active position. Oops, I lost the game. Hold on a second. Okay, queen b5, getting the queen to an active position, and the knight just drops back to b6, and white plays c4. So with this exchange, you see that white has increased his center influence, and notice how he's got all his pieces out and doing something active. But still, is this enough to win? It's not clear. So c6 is played. Gideon is a strong player. He's fighting back. Queen drops back to b3, and then queen runs to c7. So this is an interesting choice because this obviously allows the knight to take here, and that's what happens next. But to see why this was played, you have to look at a couple other ideas. There is a threat already in this position, so after the queen dropped back here, white is now just threatening to take the bishop, and once again, if the queen takes, there's a problem over here, which is that white can push the pawn to c5, chasing the knight away, and then grab the pawn on b7. So that just loses a pawn. So basically, after knight takes, white is going to have to take back with a pawn anyway to avoid losing material over on the queen side. Now, the chess engine actually recommends rook to b8. Still with an advantage to white, but it's hard to believe that this is a good move, and it's not the sort of move any grandmaster is likely to play because it's such a retreating move. This rook is going to a passive square where it's doing nothing but defending a single pawn, and there's surely going to be some way for white to play actively and get an advantage from here. So black logically tries to keep his pieces active, and he's willing to suffer. Well, there is really no choice. If he wants to stay active, he has to suffer this pawn damage. So this is the first sort of visible sign that white has an advantage. He's managed to inflict some pawn damage to the king. And now Smyslov plays queen e3, abandoning the defense of the c4 pawn. But it's actually tactically justified. It's a little too dangerous for black to grab that pawn. So, for example, if knight takes c4 was played, this is not how the game went, but the queen comes over here to h6, attacking the pawn on f6, and if queen takes f6, then white will have numerous threats with the knight coming in and a rook coming up and over. There's only he's just a couple of moves away from mating black in that case. So, so black plays queen e7, and now knight h4 anyway. And the best defense here, I guess, is rook d5, maybe just hanging on. But there's some strong moves for white in this position. So rook e3 threatening to come over here, or rook d4, maybe preceded by the move f4 to keep the keep the rook from coming over to the square g5 and defending the g file that way. So rook d5 is the best defense, but white still has a really strong attack. In any case, Gideon decided not to test out this theory of whether he could get away with grabbing the pawn, and just played king to g7 directly, defending the f6 pawn. So now maybe he's threatening to take over there. So here is an interesting moment, and it's where Smyslov plays a very nice tactical move. Basically, what he wants to do is he wants to get his knight to the g5 square. This route knight h4 doesn't seem so appealing now. All these squares look to be covered. So the question is, how can you get your knight to the g4 square? So if you want to think about this, you can see if you can play like a grandmaster. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Smyslov plays the move knight e5, a very nice, sharp move. So, of course, you have to ask what happens if you take the knight. But black just collapses after pawn takes knight. Starting with queen g5 check. King h8 is the only move. Now queen to f6 check. And the king goes back to the center, and then a rook lift, and there's no avoiding mate here, or I guess there may be some way of avoiding it, but only by giving up massive amounts of material. So it's just winning for white. So the pawn, I mean the knight cannot be taken. So pretty exciting move there. The chess engine gives the move h6 as possibly the best defense here, and then the knight does get to drop back into g4 with the idea of bringing the rook over here to support the pawn when the queen and the knight are coordinating against it. The queen goes to f3 to look at this pawn, and f5, and now knight e5, and queen e7 trying to hold on to things. And this is still winning for white. He's just got too many threats. It's going to be a while before he breaks through, but his queen can come in, his rooks can come up and over, and his knight has got a commanding position here in the center of the board where it can't be chased away easily. I guess black is going to try something like knight to d7 to undermine that knight, but the threats from white are too strong. Anyway, the move that was actually played in the game was queen e7, defending the f6 pawn in advance. And now knight g4, and rook g8 was played. There are other moves here, but basically nothing works anymore. White plays the move knight h6. He could also have continued the attack with queen h6 check, but this is a nice little tactic. He has to he can't save the rook. This basically wins the rook, and the reason he can't save the rook is because the knight is also threatening to come to f5 with the fork of the king and the queen, taking advantage of the pin. There's a pin on the e-pawn, so after knight f5, if pawn takes, then queen takes queen. The queen is just undefended there. Otherwise, the king has to move, and we get knight takes queen. So queen c7 was played, and now knight takes g8. And the game is pretty much over here. They both continue to play. This pawn on c4 has been hanging. Now that the attack is pretty much faded, but he's won material, he stops, Smyslov stops to defend the c4 pawn, which also serves to keep this knight blocked out of the game. So the knight has a slow task getting reorganized. Black drops his king back, trying to find a safer spot. Queen goes to h6, rook to g6, chasing the queen away, queen h4, knight d7, getting the knight back into the game, rook e3, the rook lift. Yeah, rook e3, cancel that. I was pausing for a second to think about d3 versus e3, but it's rook e3. So the queen goes to a5, trying to defend laterally and also to attack on the queen side. Notice that Smyslov doesn't bother to defend his queen side. He's got stronger threats over here. Rook h3, attacking the pawn. The knight goes to f8 to defend. And now rook to g3, lifting... no, rook to g3, this rook. And allowing black to grab a pawn over here. Now exchanging, which after knight takes, kicks the queen. And the queen grabs the f-pawn. And then the queen drops back to f3, defending this pawn. So he's willing to give up one pawn, but not so many. The queen goes to c2, attacking the rook, and the queen just comes back to d3. And black resigned at this point. There's actually no particularly good move for black here. The best move recommended by the engine is just to trade queens, and that's just a hopeless ending with even pawns and a rook versus a knight. Also with lots of pawns on the board, so there's no chance that black can trade off all the pawns and get to a drawn rook versus knight endgame. So Gideon resigned at this point, and Smyslov won. So with this victory, actually, Smyslov is in first place in the tournament. There was another interesting game that was played this round that was I wanted to mention. That was Reshevsky versus Szabo. It was interesting. It was a line in the Grunfeld that was sort of theoretically accepted at the time. Laszlo was playing a standard line, and Reshevsky refuted it pretty directly. So I guess an interesting game from the point of view of Grunfeld theory. So Reshevsky won that game nicely. Anyway, at the end of 4 rounds, Smyslov is in the lead at 3 points. Bronstein is at 2.5. Reshevsky is at 2.5. So they're all in the pack. At Najdorf is at 2.5. Boleslavsky is at 2.5. Averbach is at 2.5. And Max Hervé is also at 2.5. So there's a huge pack. Pile up at 2.5 points, and Smyslov in the lead at 3 points after 4 rounds. So that concludes this coverage of round 4. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments if you have in the section below, and stay tuned for future rounds. See you soon. Bye.